personally severed every tie between Patricia and me. She stayed in the capital, so I went to the frontier. When she came chasing after me to the borderlands, I locked myself in the military district and refused to see her. When my final moment approached, she stood outside the barracks, crying and begging to see me one last time as the funeral music echoed through the camp. I ignored her. After giving my last orders to my men, I closed my eyes and left this world. And she knelt before my grave, her hair turning completely white overnight. Jordan, why did you stop wanting me? Chapter 1. Jordan, the capital's military district is short of hands. Let's put the frontier mission aside for now. Stay in Beijing. I stared blankly at the steaming enamel mug on the table. When I heard those words, it was like a thunderclap exploded in my ears, jolting me wide awake. Beijing? Stay in Beijing? Wasn't I already dead? I lifted my head sharply, my eyes landing on the wall calendar. 1983. I was reborn. Reborn on the very day before I went to Patricia's house to propose marriage. That day in my previous life, I had sat in this exact same spot, thrilled after hearing the commander's words. I thought staying in Beijing was perfect, close to Patricia, giving me confidence for the proposal. The next day, I carried my promotion papers, 2 boxes of fine liquor, and several bolts of top-quality fabric to Patricia's home. But Patricia had stood by the doorframe, her face colder than the frost of midwinter. I knew her heart belonged to that educated youth named Mario. She was waiting for him to get out of prison. Yet her relatives surrounded her, murmuring, "Patricia, Jordan's an officer. He's got a future. Who knows how long Mario will be stuck inside?" And how did she finally agree? I remember she sighed, didn't even lift her eyelids, and said softly, I was overjoyed at the time, thinking that one tiny weighed more than gold. After marriage, I treated her like a treasure. If she wanted the sweet rice cakes from the south of the city, I would ride there at midnight to buy them. If she thought the curtains looked dull, I replaced them the very next day. And her heart was sealed behind ice, always cold and distant toward me. When Mario was released, she began visiting him often. Once I came back from patrol and saw her holding our daughter, waiting at the alley entrance near Mario's house. When our daughter was 5, she pointed at a wooden toy gun Mario had given her and said, "Daddy, Uncle said once he saves enough money, he'll take us to the south." By then, I was gravely ill, and the hospital had issued a critical notice. Half conscious one day, I overheard Patricia speaking on the phone in the corridor, her voice low but clear. "Once Jordan's death compensation comes through, we'll have the wedding and give the child a proper name." What a cruel joke. Her husband wasn't even dead yet, and she was already planning to use my pension to fund her own wedding with another man. The thought of my pitiful, wasted first life made my fists clench tight, my nails digging deep into my palms. "Commander, I request a transfer to the frontier." The commander froze mid-sip from his enamel mug, frowning. "The frontier? You know how harsh it is there, don't you? Once you go, it's 5 to 8 years minimum. Think it through." He paused, perhaps remembering the proposal, and added, "Besides, aren't you supposed to go to Patricia's house tomorrow?"
The proposal's off. The marriage is off. The commander slammed his mug down on the table and stood up. "What's going on with you? Yesterday you were rushing me for the recommendation letter, and now you've changed your mind. Did you two have a fight?" "No fight. I just figured some things out. Beijing's nice, but the frontier needs me more." "What things?" he pressed. "Speak clearly." I opened my mouth, but the memories of my past life stuck in my throat. What could I say? That I'd already lived once and spent a lifetime being made a fool of? Forcing a smile, I replied, "Nothing. Just realized I should go where I'm needed most. I'm a soldier. That's my duty." The commander stayed silent for a long time, exhaled a puff of smoke, and finally said, "Fine. I'll give you 5 days to think it over. If you change your mind within that time, I'll pretend this order was never given." I nodded in agreement. Stepping out of the office building, the autumn wind swept across my face. I looked up. The sky was a clear, piercing blue, so different from the gray haze I'd seen from my hospital bed in my past life. I needed to go home and tell my parents. They'd probably scold me for giving up an easy life in Beijing just to suffer at the frontier. And Patricia, just thinking of her brought all the humiliation of 2 lives flooding back. In my past life, I cherished her like a jewel. To her, I was nothing but a fool. This time, I'm done. If she wants to wait for Mario, let her. If she thinks I'm beneath her, I'll stay far, far away. Having made up my mind, I walked toward the family housing area. When I passed the department store, I saw a red Bellagio, the same kind of dress I had given her in my previous life, displayed in the window. I paused for a moment, then turned away without looking back. Red dresses, Patricia, none of it has anything to do with me anymore. Chapter 2. When I pushed open the door, the sight in the courtyard made me pause. On the rattan chair lay a pile of brand new red silk quilt covers. and neatly stacked wooden boxes lined the wall. Thermos bottles labeled Shanghai brand and enamel wash basins were piled up like a little hill. Even the old locust tree had bolts of unopened Dacron fabric hanging from its branches, bright reds and soft pinks swaying under the sunset until they almost hurt the eyes. My mother was squatting on the ground counting red envelopes. My father stood on a stool pasting festive paper characters on the doorframe. When they saw me come in, they both turned around. "Jordan, you're back." My mother clapped the dust off her hands, pointing proudly at the things around the yard, her eyes crinkling with joy. "Look at this quilt pattern, isn't it lovely? Your dad said we should pick the brightest one. And these sweet rice cakes, I asked Aunt Lee to steam them overnight. You can take them tomorrow when you go propose." My father twisted around on the stool, still holding a brush dripping with paste. "Patricia loves candied fruits from the west side of the city. I went this morning and bought 2 pounds. Think that's enough?" In my last life, I had also stood here with tears in my eyes, looking at this very same courtyard full of wedding preparations. They'd always said Patricia was a good girl, that marrying her was my blessing. And after the wedding, they never stopped reminding me to treat her well. Even on my deathbed, my mother had held my hand and whispered, "It's our fault, we couldn't help you keep Patricia's heart." But now, watching them busying about, I felt something tighten painfully in my throat. "Dad, Mom, stop for a moment." My mother froze mid-motion as she tucked apples into a basket. "What's wrong?"
It's not about the apples. I stepped closer. The cheerfulness of the courtyard stabbed at my eyes like pins. I pressed my lips together. "The proposal? Forget it. I don't want to get married." "What?" My father jumped down from the stool. "What did you say? You don't want to get married? Patricia's such a good girl. Why all of a sudden? Jordan, did you two have a fight? Girls can be shy. You should be more patient with her." "It's not a fight." I looked at their anxious faces, took a deep breath, and spoke the truth. "She doesn't like me. She never did." Just then, the sound of a bicycle bell rang from outside the gate. I turned my head. Patricia was standing there, pushing her bike. She was wearing a light blue Dacron blouse, a little sweat on her forehead. A bamboo basket hung from her handlebars, holding something wrapped in lotus leaves. "Uncle, Auntie," she greeted with a polite smile. When her eyes swept over all the betrothal gifts spread across the courtyard, her brows furrowed ever so slightly. A tiny flicker that my mother caught at once, her cheerful smile faltering. See? I wasn't lying. Patricia had always rejected my affection, no matter how sincere. But Patricia quickly composed herself and handed over the basket. "My mom asked me to bring you some freshly steamed buns." I didn't answer. Instead, I walked straight up to her. "Patricia, let me ask you something." She looked up at me, puzzled, waiting for what I'd say next. "Do you like me? Do you really want to marry me?" Patricia froze and stepped back, startled by the question. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Still, that fleeting hesitation, that flicker of resistance in her eyes reflected the truth clearer than any confession. In my last life, she'd done the same. She hadn't wanted it, but under her relatives' persuasion, she'd nodded, treating my devotion as something she was simply owed. The result? 2 miserable people trapped in a hollow marriage. I smiled faintly. My heart felt icy cold, but my mind was finally clear. "As you wish. I won't bother you anymore." "What do you mean by that?" Patricia frowned, her tone wary, as if she thought I was setting some kind of trap. I turned to my parents, who stood there stunned, disbelief all over their faces. "Nothing," I said flatly. "Just what it sounds like." Patricia stared at me for a few seconds. Perhaps she thought I was being absurd, or maybe she just didn't care enough to argue. She forced a small smile at my parents. "Uncle, Auntie, I'll get going then." Then she pushed her bicycle away, leaving without a single glance back. The sound of her bicycle bell faded into the distance, leaving behind only me, my parents, and a courtyard full of bright red wedding gifts, glaringly festive, heartbreakingly ironic. My mother was the first to react. She grabbed my hand. "Jordan, what's going on?" "Patricia, she..." "Mom." I looked at her, swallowing down all the pain of my past life and the determination of this one, and simply said, "Let it go. I'm not marrying her." My father crouched down and picked up the pastebrush from the ground. Silent for a long time, the courtyard fell quiet, save for the rustle of fabric in the wind, like a sigh echoing my heart. Maybe this was for the best. In this life, I should at least get to choose my own path once. As for Patricia, the man she loves, the future she's waiting.
The canceled proposal spread through the military compound like wildfire. By the next day, since I hadn't gone to Patricia's house, I naturally became everyone's favorite topic.
Old Wang from the mailroom gave me a few extra glances when handing over the newspaper, and even Aunt Lee in the cafeteria couldn't help asking questions as she ladled food onto my tray. I brushed it off vaguely with, "There's been a change in assignment," though deep down I knew this matter would have to be settled sooner or later. At noon the following day, when I stepped out of the base, the sun was blazing overhead. I squinted as I walked toward the residential compound and saw a familiar figure standing by the gate. Patricia. She stood under the shade of a tree, holding a canvas bag in her hands, her toes absently tracing patterns on the ground. When she saw me, she immediately came toward me. It was the first time she had ever taken the initiative to seek me out. In our previous life, decades of marriage, she probably hadn't even known exactly where my office was. Instinctively, I wanted to pretend I hadn't seen her, but her voice stopped me. "Jordan." I halted and turned around, my expression flat. "What is it?" She came up to me, a faint sheen of sweat glistening on her forehead, her voice carrying a rare sense of urgency. "Yesterday, why didn't you come to my house for the proposal?" I froze for a moment, then almost laughed at how absurd it was. Just 2 days ago, in my parents' courtyard, she'd been silent and evasive, her resistance written all over her face, and now she had the nerve to ask me this? "Patricia, did you forget what I said yesterday?" "You don't like me," so I ended it. "When did I ever say I didn't like you?" She raised her voice, her cheeks flushing. "I never said I refused." "No, you didn't say it, but the way you frowned, your silence, that look in your eyes, even my parents could see what it meant. I know exactly who you're waiting for. I used to be stupid enough to think I could change your heart. But thinking about it now, forcing a fruit to ripen before its time only makes it bitter. You don't have to feel guilty. I won't force anything. From now on, we'll go our separate ways. That's best for both of us." I thought those words were giving both of us a dignified ending. After all, in my previous life, she had never openly rejected me. She simply stayed silent and let me walk willingly into a dead end. But before I could take a step away, she suddenly grabbed the sleeve of my military uniform. "You can't do this." Her voice trembled slightly, all her usual calm and pride gone. "Everyone in the compound knows you were supposed to propose. Now you suddenly don't show up. What will people think of me? They'll think there's something wrong with me." Her fingers tightened around the fabric, crumpling it in her grasp. I looked at her reddened eyes, but in my mind I saw another image. Patricia years later, waiting at the alley corner with our daughter to meet Mario after his release, her expression unbothered when the neighbors saw them together. And then her planning to use my death compensation to hold her wedding with another man, never once caring about saving face. So why now, when it came to me, did she suddenly care what others might?
Expressionless, I pulled my sleeve free and took a deliberate step back to put distance between us. My decision won't change. What others say is your concern, not mine. With that, I brushed past her. I didn't look back, so I didn't see the dazed look on her face as she stood there. Even from a distance, though, I caught a glimpse of her under the tree, her figure stretched long in the sunlight. There was something new in her eyes, still distant, but tinged with something else. Confusion, perhaps, or something more complicated. But I neither studied it nor cared to. Let her be. Things needed to end cleanly. Her hesitation, her embarrassment, those were hers to face. As for me, Jordan, I would never again pay the price for her choices. Chapter 4. When I got home, I began packing for my departure. My parents came in after hearing the noise, just in time to see me pressing 2 pairs of rubber shoes into the bottom of my trunk. "What are you doing? Why are you packing?" Without pausing, I wrapped my enamel mug in an old newspaper and tucked it inside. "I've applied for a frontier posting in Xinjiang." "Where? Xinjiang?" My father's teacup almost slipped from his hand. "Didn't you say you were staying in Beijing? Why are you suddenly going so far away?" I pressed the last shirt into the trunk, fastened the latch, and said without looking up, "I was wrong before. They need people out there more." Then I didn't see the point in hiding it from her, so I leaned casually against the doorframe and nodded. "Yeah, I'm leaving in a few days." You're going to Xinjiang? Why? Weren't you staying in Beijing?" I applied to serve on the frontier. My tone was calm, detached, as if I were... The room fell silent for a long while. My mother crouched down, running her fingers over the military insignia on the box. "You've really decided? The sandstorms there are fierce, and the winters can freeze a man to the bone." "Yeah, I've decided," I said, squatting beside her and taking her hands. "I leave in 3 days. I thought they'd try to persuade me otherwise, just like they did in my last life. After all, I'm their only son." But suddenly my father slapped his thigh.
Then we'll go too. Your mother and I will come with you. I was stunned. Go with me? But the conditions there are harsh. You too? Harsh? What's harsh about it? My mother stood up, eyes bright with resolve. Your father's always talking about how he used to serve on the frontier when he was young. I've always wanted to see what the Gobi Desert is like. Perfect timing. We'll treat it like retirement out there. They looked at each other and, to my disbelief, actually started planning it out. Bring the thick quilt. Find your dad's fur hat. Let's buy a couple of cans of fruit preserves for the road. Watching them bustle about, I opened my mouth to protest, then swallowed the words back down. Maybe leaving this place would be a new beginning for all of us. Just as we were almost unpacking, the sound of a bicycle bell came from outside the courtyard gate. I opened the door. Patricia stood there, her forehead beaded with sweat. She'd clearly come in a hurry. Jordan, Before she could finish, my mother called from inside. Jordan, find your father's wool socks. He'll need them in Xinjiang. Patricia froze, eyes widening. Xinjiang. In a few days, the official notice would be out. It wasn't exactly a secret.
But her voice trembled slightly. Then, when will you be back? I shrugged. Don't know. Maybe 5 years, maybe 10, or maybe... I paused, meeting her eyes. Maybe I'll never come back. The instant those words left my mouth, I saw her eyelashes tremble violently. That woman who had always been cold and distant, who could barely spare me a smile, now had a trace of panic flashing across her face. She stepped closer, her chest rising and falling. You have a good life here in Beijing. Why go somewhere so far? Is it because... Patricia, I cut her off, my tone turning firm and heavy. Everyone has their own path. Do I need your permission to walk mine? She froze, lips pressed into a thin line. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows across her face. For the first time, I saw unmistakable loss in her eyes, like a cloud scattered by the wind, barely visible before it blurred again with moisture. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but swallowed it instead. Inside, my parents were still bustling, the sound of shifting trunks echoing through the small house. I didn't want to drag this out any longer. Stepping aside, I motioned toward the gate. If there's nothing else, please go. I still have packing to do. It was the first time I'd ever dismissed her. In my past life, no matter how coldly she treated me, I had always run to her, afraid she might be hurt, desperate to please her. But now, watching her stand there with emotions I couldn't read in her eyes, all I felt was calm. Patricia stood there for a while, then finally turned and walked away, pushing her bicycle slowly. Her figure looked fragile in the sunlight, her steps no longer hurried. Maybe I should have followed her, asked her what that look in her eyes really meant. But standing there, I realized I was tired. I no longer wanted to guess, no longer wanted to care. It seemed I really didn't love Patricia anymore. Chapter 05. In the following 2 days, the military district granted me a few days off to pack my things. Unexpectedly, the person I ended up seeing the most was Patricia. Every couple of days, she would barge into my yard again. The sound of her bicycle bell had basically become a death knell for me. That day, I was stuffing compressed biscuits into a wooden box when she called my name outside the gate again. I opened the door and saw her standing under the sun, the tip of her nose reddened from the heat. Whatever patience I had left was gone. My brow furrowed without me realizing it. Why are you here again? She froze at my expression, like she'd been pricked by a needle. The next second, her eyes reddened, tears glimmering on her lashes. Jordan, you never used to look at me like that. Her voice trembled, tinged with grievance. In my previous life, whenever she cried, my heart would instantly melt into a puddle. But now, all I felt was a throbbing ache at my temples. Leaning against the doorframe, I looked into her reddened eyes and suddenly realized there were things that needed to be made clear once and for all. Some tangled feelings needed to be cut off completely. I sighed and led her to the shade under a tree. Patricia, you said it yourself. That was before. Back then, I liked you. I really liked you. Sunlight spilled over the gray at their temples, and a warmth spread through my chest. The truck engine sputtered to life with a deep put-put sound. As I waved through the window toward the crowd, I suddenly caught sight of a staggering figure in the rearview mirror. Patricia running along the roadside, hair tangled wildly in the wind, chasing after the truck. I frowned and knocked on the partition behind the driver. Could you stop for a second? Jumping off the step, I landed on the gravel just as Patricia caught up, bracing her hands on her knees, gasping for breath. When she lifted her head, her eyes were red as a rabbit's, tears falling one after another, soaking the fabric over her chest. Jordan? She couldn't get out a full sentence, but she gripped my sleeve tightly, fingers trembling. Could you not go? The wind from the distant Gobi carried traces of sand, a prelude to the storms that awaited me. I looked at her tear-streaked face, and inside I was calm, utterly, completely calm. In my past life, I had imagined this scene countless times, her running after me, begging me to stay. But now that it was real, those imagined pictures seemed faded and meaningless. "I regret it," she choked out between sobs. "Every time I think I'll never see you again, I get so scared. I don't want to lose you. Let's get married, Jordan, right now. I'll go with you to Xinjiang. I'll do whatever you say." Her voice trembled with desperation, almost a plea. That single word, marry, was one I had longed to hear across 2 lifetimes, but now it only sounded bitterly ironic. Gently, I pulled my sleeve free from her grip. The fabric was still warm from her palm, but it couldn't warm my heart. "Patricia," I said quietly, "don't try anymore. It's too late." She snapped her head up, eyes wide in shock and disbelief. "What do you mean too late? I'm telling you I love you, that I want to marry you. How is that too late?" "Because I don't need it anymore." I stepped back half a pace. The truck engine still thumped rhythmically, like a drum urging me onward. "I'm going to Xinjiang," I said. "That's where I'm meant to be." "I'll go with you. I can learn to cook, to sew. I can take care of you and your parents too." "No." I cut her off and turned toward the truck. "Stay in Beijing. Find someone you truly love and live the life you actually want." I didn't look back. I climbed into the truck. My parents glanced at me anxiously, but I shook my head. "I'm fine." The engine roared again, the tires crunching over gravel, the sound rough and final. Through the window I saw Patricia still standing where I'd left her. The wind whipped at her clothes, making her look like a faded flag. Her mouth moved, shouting something I couldn't hear, swallowed up by the noise of the engine and the wind. The truck sped up, her figure grew smaller and smaller, until it became a blurry dot on the horizon, and then vanished, swallowed by the dust. When we reached the corp station in Xinjiang, the Gobi wind cut across my face like blades. Life there was simple and relentless. Training, patrols, reclaiming wasteland. Sweat dripped onto the sand, drying before it even hit the ground. Every so often the communications clerk went.
Sunlight spilled over the gray at their temples, and a warmth spread through my chest. The truck engine sputtered to life with a deep put-put sound. As I waved through the window toward the crowd, I suddenly caught sight of a staggering figure in the rearview mirror, Patricia, running along the roadside, hair tangled wildly in the wind, chasing after the truck. I frowned and knocked on the partition behind the driver. "Could you stop for a second?" Jumping off the step, I landed on the gravel just as Patricia caught up, bracing her hands on her knees, gasping for breath. When she lifted her head, her eyes were red as a rabbit's, tears falling one after another, soaking the fabric over her chest. "Jordan." She couldn't get out a full sentence, but she gripped my sleeve tightly, fingers trembling. Could you not go?" The wind from the distant Gobi carried traces of sand, a prelude to the storms that awaited me. I looked at her tear-streaked face, and inside I was calm, utterly, completely calm. In my past life, I had imagined this scene countless times, her running after me, begging me to stay. But now that it was real, those imagined pictures seemed faded and meaningless. "I regret it," she choked out between sobs. "Every time I think I'll never see you again, I get so scared. I don't want to lose you. Let's get married, Jordan, right now. I'll go with you to Xinjiang. I'll do whatever you say." Her voice trembled with desperation, almost a plea. That single word, marry, was one I had longed to hear across 2 lifetimes. But now it only sounded bitterly ironic. Gently, I pulled my sleeve free from her grip. The fabric was still warm from her palm, but it couldn't warm my heart. "Patricia," I said quietly, "don't try anymore. It's too late." She snapped her head up, eyes wide in shock and disbelief. "What do you mean too late? I'm telling you I love you, that I want to marry you. How is that too late?" "Because I don't need it anymore." I stepped back half a pace. The truck engine still thumped rhythmically, like a drum urging me onward. "I'm going to Xinjiang," I said. "That's where I'm meant to be." "I'll go with you. I can learn to cook, to sew. I can take care of you and your parents too." "No." I cut her off and turned toward the truck. "Stay in Beijing. Find someone you truly love and live the life you actually want." I didn't look back. I climbed into the truck. My parents glanced at me anxiously, but I shook my head. "I'm fine." The engine roared again, the tires crunching over gravel, the sound rough and final. Through the window, I saw Patricia still standing where I had left her. The wind whipped at her clothes, making her look like a faded flag. Her mouth moved,
shouting something I couldn't hear, swallowed up by the noise of the engine and the wind. The truck sped up. Her figure grew smaller and smaller, until it became a blurry dot on the horizon, and then vanished, swallowed by the dust. When we reached the corp station in Xinjiang, the Gobi wind cut across my face like blades. Life there was simple and relentless. Training, patrols, reclaiming wasteland. Sweat dripped onto the sand, drying before it even hit the ground. Every so often, the communications clerk would—
More than once, I saw Patricia's name among them, her neat handwriting, the postmark stamped with Beijing's date. She wrote about little things in the compound, her new job, how the seasons were changing, and she'd always ask at the end, "When will you write back?" I kept every one of her letters at the bottom of a wooden chest. I never replied to a single one. Sometimes, late at night, lying in the underground shelter while wind and sand rattled the tent, I'd think of her running after the truck, crying, "Let's get married." A flicker of emotion would surface, then the Gobi wind would blow it away. The debts of my last life, the ties of this one, all were severed the moment I closed that truck door. She had her Beijing, I had my Gobi. From then on, mountains high and rivers wide, our lives would never cross again. Chapter 07. But Patricia's persistence turned out to be far greater than I ever imagined. Her letters came steadily for 2 whole years, brown envelopes stacked at the bottom of my wooden chest, covered now by a thin layer of dust. During those 2 years, I earned a commendation for leading a border reconnaissance mission and was promoted from company commander to battalion commander. The color of my epaulettes changed. When I shouted orders on the training ground, the new recruits behind me stood even straighter. The Gobi wind and sand had carved lines into my face, sharpening my gaze like a blade drawn from its sheath. Everyone who saw me called out "Commander," and no one remembered the young fool who once chased after a girl in Beijing. Then one afternoon, the communications clerk came running into my office. "Commander, there's a young lady at the gate asking for you. She says she came from Beijing." The red and blue pencil in my hand paused mid-air, the tip stabbing a small hole into the military map. There was no need to ask. Who else but Patricia would travel thousands of miles from Beijing to this godforsaken Gobi desert? A cold smile tugged at my lips. I could still remember vividly how in my previous life she had left me standing in the snow while she went off to see Mario, and now she was the one waiting for me? Without lifting my head, I continued marking coordinates on the map. Tell her to leave. The clerk hesitated, looking uncomfortable. But she said she must see you. She's been standing out there for 2 hours already, in this heat. I repeated, voice low and firm. Tell her to leave. The pencil lead snapped against the paper with a sharp crack. The clerk understood better than to ask again and hurried off. I didn't know what happened afterward, only that when I returned to the officers' quarters that evening, even my mother had heard. When she saw me come in, she hesitated, words on the tip of her tongue. "Jordan, the staff downstairs said, there's a girl who's been waiting for you outside the battalion gate all afternoon." "Hmm?" I gave a short reply and reached for my keys. "She came all the way from Beijing. Maybe something urgent. Why don't you go talk to her?" "No." I hung my cap on the wall hook, my voice steady and indifferent. "There's nothing left for us." In my past life, she had made me wait 3 hours in the freezing cold outside her apartment, saying, "Mario just got out of prison. I need to see him." She'd left me burning with fever, clutching a child, saying, "Mario wants to talk about something." Now she stood waiting for me under the desert sun for a few hours. What was that in comparison? He rented a mud brick house near headquarters. She says she's planning to settle here. I froze mid-task, gripping the tiny model soldier I'd been using for tactical simulation. Settle here? What the hell was she trying to do? Dig her heels in for a standoff? At that time, the regiment happened to be forming a tactical research unit, recruiting personnel for behind-the-scenes work. I barely hesitated before submitting my application. From the training field to the research office, from a frontline commander to a background strategist. I buried myself in endless military documents, poring over maps and data every day. I hardly even went back to the quarters anymore. The research office was on the top floor of the building, its windows facing the vast Gobi. If I lifted my eyes, I could see the snow mountains in the distance. I deliberately left the curtains half drawn, enough sunlight to fall across the open files, but also enough to block out whatever gaze might exist from below. One night, I worked late and went downstairs to fetch some water. As I passed the entrance, I caught sight of a figure crouched by the wall under the corridor light. In the moonlight, the silhouette clutched a cloth bundle, shoulders trembling ever so slightly. I didn't know how long she had been waiting. It was Patricia. Hearing my footsteps, she lifted her head. Her face was red from the cold, her eyelashes tipped with frost. When she saw my shadow stretching halfway across the ground, her eyes lit up. She struggled to her feet. "Jordan!" But I didn't stop walking. I went right past her without a word, not even granting her the chance for a greeting. The door of the boiler room slammed shut behind me, cutting off whatever words she had been about to say. Back in the research office, I leaned against the radiator. My heart was utterly still. No waves, no anger, no pity, only a quiet calm, like dust finally settling. What she owed me in the last life, I no longer wished to calculate. But that didn't mean I would ever allow her to come close again. Let her wait. Let the Gobi wind scatter her obsession. Let time grind down her unwillingness. As for me, I, Jordan, am no longer that fool whose heart would race at a single word from her. My battlefield lies upon the map, within tactical simulations, across the vast land I've sworn to defend with my life. The only place it will never be is within Patricia's tears, nor her hesitation. Chapter 08. I pinned myself to the iron chair in the military research office and sat there for 5 years. Patricia was like the desert grass that survived on the Gobi, appearing in front of the office building every so often. Sometimes she